Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the GRC and Cybersecurity podcast. In today's episode, in the lead of Cyber and Risk series, we've got a very special guest, Alexander Zhitenev. We're going to cover typical questions that we go through, but there's going to be a deep dive today on business continuity, disaster recovery, and how to build a resilient organisation. Hi Alex, can you introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the company you work for?
Hey, Matt. Yes, thank you for inviting me. So I'm Alexander Zhitenev, and I am Group CISO for IFCO Systems. I bet you haven't heard about IFCO Systems before, but I'm pretty sure you might be one of our customers. So whenever you do grocery shopping, and whenever your listeners do grocery shopping, pretty much anywhere in the world, take their fruits and veggies from those black boxes, and those black boxes are actually most likely IFCO boxes. So next time you do grocery shopping, look at the side of container that hosts fruits and veggies, and those reusable packaging containers is what IFCO does. We ship them to food producers, farmers typically. They load them with produce, send them supermarkets unload them, and then boxes are collapsed, sent to washing, cleaning, repairing, and then the cycle repeats up to 120 times, and then it's shredded in pieces, and from those small chunks, new boxes are created. This brings enormous savings in electricity, water consumption, CO2 emissions, so that is very beneficial from environmental perspectives. I think so. IFCO system, that's their core business, and my job at IFCO is to ensure business processes run uninterrupted, and that IFCO stays secure, and our customer data stays secure, our own data stays secure.
Fantastic. So before we get any further, one of the things we always like to ask is, what do you get up to outside of work? If you've got any hobbies, any interests?
So I'm a big on travel. I'm blessed to live in Bavaria, in Germany. So we have lots and lots of magnificent sites where you can travel inside the country, outside the country. So travel with family, hiking, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours in going up the mountain, then enjoying the view, enjoying the food, and those are the hobbies during summer season. Alpine skiing for sure, and cooking good food. I always love good food. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah, good food is definitely something we can all get behind. So you kind of mentioned your role, but what is your role? And can you talk a little bit about the history of how you got into your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm over 20, by now over 20 years in information technology and information security. Started back in 2000, what was it, 1, 2, 3, as a help desk. It's a help desk, and then grew up in ranks, ran help desks, then moved into infrastructure, architecture, and was deploying systems, infrastructure systems, customer-facing systems, end user computing systems for large companies. And ultimately, security was always a topic of an interest when I operate under assumption, back then at least operated, probably still do, that in order to protect something or to break something, you really need to know what is it that you're protecting and or you're trying to attack and break into. So it took me, over a decade, probably close to 15 years, to accumulate enough knowledge so that I felt sufficiently prepared to move into a role of a protector, blue team role basically, and then fully switch into information security field. And so the past probably 8 or so years, maybe close to 10 years, I'm fully focused on information security. First, security engineering and operations, and now taking care of everything that falls under information security's responsibility, from governance, risk, compliance, engineering, you name it.
Fantastic. So flipping back to IFCO, can you talk a little bit about the size and stage of the information security program and what you're focusing on?
Right. So information security at IFCO protects or applies. Scope of information security program is IFCO as a whole. So all companies within the group, operating pretty much in every country in the world, except for some Central Africa, Australia, some countries in Asia Pacific region. We are working together with our colleagues in IT, with our colleagues at risk, to ensure information security risks are managed within the parameters defined by the business. So team itself is very much in line, built in line, created in line with IFCO's overall philosophy. The approach is to keep things as lean as reasonably possible and in-source intellectual property while outsourcing the actual doing. That's the approach, and I'm pretty sure many of your customers follow a variation of this. Keep the intellectual property inside and outsource everything that can be outsourced: automation, self-service, third-party automation. Yeah, so that's the setup. Team itself is 6 people plus me, taking care of governance risk compliance, security architecture, incident response, and we are supported by a number of vendors, external third parties, who actually help us and make things happen.
And in terms of the team, so you said you're based in Germany. Is it a global team? Are you all based in Germany? Where is everyone based?
Well, actually, we just hired one more person in Germany. Until recently, there wasn't anybody. In Germany, the team is quite geographically dispersed. It's India, it's the UK, it's the US, where my folks are sitting and operating. I'm really blessed to be able to tap into international global markets. Using my connections, and tapping into resource pools that is not really available. As you know, like searching in just one city or one country is quite difficult, and when you can expand your scope, it makes your life easier.
Fantastic. So, just in terms of, I always like to ask, where do you report into the organization? Who ultimately do you report into?
I report into the CIO, so CIO is my boss. We have been just yesterday discussing it in another forum. What are the right, appropriate reporting lines for a CISO? My 5 cents there, and I continue repeating it basically wherever I get an opportunity to talk about this subject, is reporting line for CISO is generally a function of information security and IT maturity at a company. In those companies where CISOs are security manager in charge of firewalls, it probably does not make sense for a company to place CISO under CEO, chief risk officer, or whoever. However, as maturity of a company increases, and important to know that it's not always needed for maturity of company to increase beyond a certain point. But if it does, and when it does, then at some point in time, there is a logical transition from CISO being the security guy inside IT to CISO and CISO function actually becoming more and more a risk function. And then the question comes, and it obviously depends from company to company, but where is the risk and information security risk best placed? I really liked a statement or example that one of colleagues gave just recently. There are 3 people in advanced, big, mature companies that are dealing with risk. Is a general counsel, it's CFO, and it's the CISO. Each of those looking at their individual risks, but ultimately those are the 3 key risk people inside the company, and obviously the chief risk officer, who helps to put everything together under the enterprise risk umbrella.
Yes, it's one of those things that we've seen a lot more recently, where it's like, actually, like, ultimately it's somewhere where the CISO's voice can be heard in an appropriate manner, and you've got the executive sponsor where you feel, I guess, that you can make your point and take it forward, isn't it? I think a lot of it does come down to that, but I do like what you say, like similar to making it similar to a risk function or an audit function, it becomes a assurance function for the organization rather than through the standard operating lines.
100%. And what I think is also very important, irrespective of how immature organization is and where the CISO is residing, it's very important that the CISO gets a line of communication to be it the board, be it the C-suite, and getting a chance to interact with the board or higher powers without being proxied by a CIO from time to time, right? And as I said, maybe if the CISO is actually information security manager in charge of antiviruses and firewalls, it still is a good idea for those colleagues in the business to actually sit down with your information security manager and hear what he or she has to say.
Yeah, and it's a great thing to also for them to learn business context, isn't it? And I think that context of the business and being able to say, yes, I have this technical vulnerability, but explaining it to the business, that also could bring down, if you're in finance, the payroll system. It's about helping them understand things and then understanding actually that's really important and I need to do it, rather than just sending them, here's 10 vulnerabilities you need to go and fix.
100%. So what I absolutely preach when speaking to colleagues aspiring to grow into CISO role or get better noticed on the top level is never forget, but keep all your technical knowledge in mind, use it. It is your superpower, but learn to speak business language with the business. Because if you come and say, oh my God, the main controller, 600 vulnerabilities, internet exposed on port number, whatever, they go like, okay, where is the CIO who typically translates this for me? And when you come and say, look, there is such and such probability of us losing so much money this year because of all the possible things that can go wrong with cyber attack. The moment you make it about money, you get their attention, right? The moment you make it about whatever is important for them in the OT interaction. Absolutely. If it's an OT and you say, look, you are actually exposing your people, there's a life hazard, you got their attention. And if you can explain it in terms they can understand. So what is a vulnerability? It's a weakness. What is a weakness? A weakness, well, vulnerability of your home is that you have actually doors and windows. So this is why you have locks and your windows are relatively solid. You can't just open them. Etc. When you make it real, when you translate what this vulnerability means, and you always remind your business counterparts that look, it's a game of probabilities, and B, we as risk practitioners understand that information security risk is just one of the facets of many other risks, called the pestle approach, that you have to deal with and make risk-aware decisions and put make a risk-benefit analysis before making a decision. So in all the risk acceptance and risk presentations I'm having inside the company, I always caveat with saying, look, my job is to present you information security risk viewpoint. You as an asset owner and you as a future potential risk owner, you obviously have a broader picture that you must consider, and ideally let us consider it together, helping you to make more decisions, which I believe is the most important, the essence of job of risk practitioners, helping business to make risk-aware decisions.
Yeah, because ultimately you don't own the risk. You're helping them understand it, and then they make an informed decision. So last time we spoke, you spoke a bit about business continuity and resilience. So we always like to do a bit of a deep dive subject. So let's talk about continuity and resilience as a concept. Can you talk me through the approach for business continuity and resilience within your organization?
Absolutely. So what I notice is that the topic of business continuity and IT disaster recovery is really taking traction and gains in popularity. Because what is it? It's your if all else fails plan. And I always recommend starting it by sitting down with executives and saying, okay, how much can your business stand still? Have you thought about this? And not even because of IT, but it can be COVID. It can be fires, flood, hurricanes, acts of war, what have you. Have you thought about what is the maximum period the whole business can stand still without destroying it, or without, actually, if you thought about without destroying it, then what about without causing material financial impact? Have you defined this? This is typically a starting point that gets colleagues in the business owners, gets them, gets the thought running. Afterwards, it's very important to make a dashed line between business continuity and IT disaster recovery. So what is business continuity? Business continuity is the ability of business processes, mission-critical business processes, to continue running following a major interruption. And major interruption can be technological, it can be absolutely non-technological. As mentioned, facilities burned down, office disconnected from power, there's a hurricane or flood or whatever it is. And this is business continuity. It is much more sophisticated, I would say, than pure IT disaster recovery, hitting your recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives. Once those two concepts are understood and colleagues are buying into them, understanding them, the next step is business impact analysis, understanding what are all the dependencies for selected mission critical business processes. Or let's take a step back, defining those mission critical business processes. What are they and who owns them within the company? Very important. Followed by speaking to those people and asking what is from their perspective maximum allowable downtime. How long can you stay without a particular business process? And then what always helps is to speak with finance and say, okay, let's assume this business process is down. When will we start losing money, and how much money will we as a company lose because there's no revenue stream for 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. Sometimes answers vary, and it is a job of whoever is in charge of business continuity to reconcile those. Ultimately bringing it to top dogs who make a decision, and then deciding what are our officially recognized maximum allowable downtimes for each business process in each line of businesses, each geography, what have you. And only then comes in IT. Obviously, most enterprises these days are IT enterprises, and that's very well understood, hence such an importance of IT. But IT only comes in when there is a good understanding on the business side. What is it that we can afford? Then it's a conversation, and remember, we've already done the business impact analysis, so we have decent understanding what IT systems users or process practitioners believe are enabling their business processes. Then comes in IT, and the question goes to IT. So if we were to recover it from scratch, imagine data center burned down, or you are under an attack that has completely wiped out your IT infrastructure. What will it take you to recover? How long it will take you to recover? And what is the recovery point objective, right? So how much data will be lost? Then starts a conversation. Have we tested it? Is it realistic? Ultimately arriving at a real, or at first expected, then if we get a chance to test, we must get a chance to test eventually, actual recovery point, recovery time objective. And then we come back to the business and say, dear business, this is what IT can actually do. Is this good enough, right? Let us sit together and see how far is recovery time, recovery point objective from actual expected. And if they're far away, far apart, the question becomes, how do we close this gap? And it can be done through technology. IT becomes faster, up to whatever hot standby. So one data center, one set of infrastructure fails, hand over to another. It actually is all on business, right? So the downtime, so-called downtime procedures kick in, and people know, worst case, no IT systems, pen, paper, fax devices, what have you, telex devices, to start taking orders, communicating with each other, and what have you. So that's the point. Another important aspect that often gets overlooked in the whole business continuity disaster recovery aspect is a concept of vital records. Also very, very important one. So let's say you've defined your business process, your downtime procedures. Everybody knows what is it that they should perform, how they will perform it, where they go and buy a laptop if their laptop is destroyed. And then comes the question, okay, do you know whom will you call? Or do you have the bits of data required to execute your business processes? Do you know where are your who are your creditors, who is supposed to execute your orders, what have you. So this vital data, vital records, so-called vital records, are extremely important to actually execute your downtime procedures. And this typically comes as a realization at the end of business continuity project. Hey, we also need to upgrade the whole vital record system, right? Because it may be whatever. We do weekly dumps of data, and we pretty much know whom to communicate, how to execute business processes. But there's typically, after 1, 2, 3 tabletops and exercises, an appetite to have something a little bit more automated. So we don't have to manually dump our vital records every day, week, month, whatever it is, but it actually is there and verified by automation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think a few years ago people were falling out of doing BC as much as business continuity as much, but I think probably the last 4 years or 3 or 4 years with COVID, the war in Ukraine, the natural disasters that there's been, is really making people think, actually, we need to be a lot more on top of this. And there's also things like operational resilience in banking, where they're now being told they have to do it. They have to put money aside. They have to build resilient systems if they were to fail, that their banking system wouldn't go down, and all the things we saw a few weeks ago wouldn't happen. But yeah, it's a really, really big change. So you've talked about what your program is. What do you believe, like if you had to say the 3 key benefits of an effective business continuity program?
So it is your overall enterprise resiliency. Business properly done, business continuity contributes to your enterprise resiliency. That ultimately you can see it as, threefold. Number one, it's your risk mitigation, in some cases risk avoidance mechanism. So you de-risk the company. If you have thought about what will you do in an event of cyber attack, fire, flood, you name whatever your threat scenarios are, it's already a step one. If you've documented this and you took the knowledge out of tribal knowledge and put it on paper, you made one more step. If you tested it, even in a tabletop, just sitting and playing it as a tabletop game, you've made 3 steps ahead. So you thought about everything that, not everything, but a lot of things that what will go wrong, what can go wrong. So by just doing those relatively simple things, you take your company, you save yourselves hours, if not days, of initial crisis phase. So this is de-risking the company. Second, it's actually avoiding some costs. Believe it or not, looking at for example, insurance, cyber insurance area, one of the questions they're asking is, how is your, what's your recovery? What are your recovery plans? Business continuity, disaster recovery, tested, not tested. At the very least, do you have backups? And now not only insurance companies, but also your banks, lenders, debt and equity holders are interested to know how is your company performing in the business continuity disaster recovery space. So this is cost avoidance. And third, which is also quite important, is actually you are, by doing this, by practicing, by having business continuity, by practicing it, you are signaling, you will be in a position to signal to your prospect and existing customers that continuity of business, ability to serve your customers, is taken seriously at a particular business place. So helping indirectly, but still helping to retain existing revenue streams and win new ones. So this is huge. Last but not least, ESG score. ESG score is actually considering business continuity, disaster recovery aspects, and you can add a couple of points on top of your existing score by having a mature business continuity program. So all for-profit companies care about costs and revenues. All companies care about risk, and ESG aspects are applicable to them. So business continuity is one of those things that's good for the company. Last point is what I have seen, that business continuity and disaster recovery, when executed together, they are a tremendous booster of conversation between IT, data, risk, and business owners. So you bring people together at a table and they learn to understand and appreciate why certain business processes depend on certain IT systems and how they're actually interlinked between each other. So by executing your business impact analysis and tabletops, you demolish those walls, metaphorical walls that have seen so many pigs flying back and forth. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it also helps folks on both sides of the table to appreciate the work others are doing a little more, because when you start thinking about downtime procedures and all the hoops that people will need to jump over, businesses, well, okay, IT probably is an enabler for us. Now we see it, hopefully we see it again, or this is yet another confirmation. And also the IT folks, they see how much business people do, whatever function it is, right? So from one function to another, and they really said that no, those are not well, users. It's actually, wow, people who do the business. Respect.
So you've obviously set up this program. It's going really well. What lessons learned? Is there some things that you think if you could do it again that you'd want to share to our listeners?
It probably is worth its own episode. But what I will say, if nothing else, make sure that your business continuity program, not even disaster recovery, business continuity program, is sponsored from the very top. Because if it isn't, it will be much more, well, your chances of success are going down. That will be number one. Number two, make sure it is clear that it isn't IT project, because it isn't. It is a business project, business resiliency, where IT is just one of many components. And I kept on repeating, and I keep on repeating, you hear it, that cyber is just one of many things that can go wrong with your business processes. It's everything you revealed during business impact assessment and analysis, where people, facilities, suppliers, electricity and telephone companies, they all play their part. So it's by far not an IT project, so never ever pitch it as an IT project. IT can be very well positioned to kickstart it because they have an expertise. Now, this brings me to my third point. Make sure, it's very important that there is a business representative spearheading the business continuity part. Because again, this is not an IT project. It's a business project where IT plays a significant part. We help to kickstart it because we have expertise, but then we should start it rolling and hand it over to somebody in business to keep on running it.
Fantastic. So we're going to flip back into some of, I guess, the more standard questions now. So what are you doing at the moment that you think is really working and making a difference in the business?
Quarterly risk reviews. So, well, I would let's scratch the word quarterly and replace it with regular. Regular risk reviews, and regularity and frequency, every listener will define for their particular business and lines of business inside it. But speaking to both asset owners and risk owners, helping to realize what are material information security risks impacting their systems that are enabling particular business processes. This is it consumes probably good 20%, 20 to 30% of my time throughout the year. So regular scheduled risk reviews, as well as ad hoc or project-specific risk reviews, so helping all the stakeholders who should be making decisions to make risk-aware decisions. That is absolutely crucial in elevating risk-aware culture across the enterprise. So it's not like, well, I guess security or IT will take care of it. It's like, there are privacy risks, there are information security risks. How do I think about them together with people from IT, those who understand how systems are running, before we put something in production, before we put something in place? That is one of that is probably the key element that really works well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can imagine like actually getting them to understand and working on that kind of understanding the risk, explaining it to them, and as we said before, like bringing it down to their level so they understand how it impacts on the business can make a huge difference. So, what are the biggest challenges that you have?
I mean, I probably will not offer any unique perspective. It's people, finding the right people, retaining the right people, making sure your people are happy, and making sure your stakeholders are happy. So people side of this job is one of the biggest, if not the biggest side of this job. Followed probably by time. Everybody, well, many of my colleagues and friends and peers in the industry, they wish they had more hours in the day. So finding the right time. And my answer here is prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. And it is actually about saying no to a lot of fantastic things. But it is about prioritization and well, protecting your time, right? So make sure you set proper boundaries.
If you don't end up nailing your colours to the mast that this is the most important thing, this is the thing I need to work on, and putting time aside from it, you can be 2 weeks later and you've just spent time in meetings and you've not pushed things forward. And it, I think we all can do it, right? The meeting fatigue, and it can get a bit much.
Absolutely, and this is where I think, for example, Kanban helps a lot, right? So be it like really full Scrum implementation, Agile implementation, or just a Kanban board, whatever backlog doing done, you still get an opportunity to sort topics, actions, deliverables, activities, however you call them, by importance, and you pick the ones, put on top the ones that are really important, right? So then you always.
I live in Trello. My wife, everything is in a Kanban board, and she's like, "How do you do this?" I'm just like, you just get used to it, because otherwise you forget things.
Absolutely, and then those of us who do journaling, be it daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, it's always it was a very good advice I've heard many years ago to, whenever you do journaling, allocate one segment, one section to call out the most important task for whatever it is, day, week, month, and then that helps you to reflect on what's actually important today, maybe work, hopefully sometimes not work, and then really prioritize it and put it, allocate it, slot it within the time when you're most productive. Saying, okay, I said this is the most important task. Let me protect this task and get it executed.
100%. So let's talk a little bit something different here. So you talked about people, but can you talk me through what you think a great information security professional looks like? What do you look for when you're hiring?
It really depends on what role, but in general, it's attitude and aptitude, desire to go. So we're far past the stage where you can say, okay, here's a full list, and then there's a selection of IT professionals or cybersecurity professionals that you can choose from. It's actually what I value the most is ability to continuously develop and pivot, because I believe this is one of the key success factors in all professions, I guess, but information security for sure, because information security professionals in small teams, I give you that in huge teams you probably might be focused only on a topic, whatever. Vulnerability scans, not even assessments or management, just scans, and you're really good at it. Can be the case, but in smaller and mid-sized companies, you need to be to an extent relatively universal with certain areas of expertise. And again, this advice or this perspective goes to those working in smaller and mid-sized teams. Your ability to be flexible and not saying, well, I've seen colleagues who said, well, I am a firewall rules expert and that's what I do and that's what I intend to do for the rest of my life. That probably is a workable scenario. So don't get me wrong. But those who strive for continuous development, evolution, they have much more intense lives. Somebody will say it's catastrophic. Somebody will say, "Oh, this is life," right? So again, know what's good for you, know what floats your boat, and then follow it. But what is important in smaller, nimble, agile teams is the ability to actually pick up new skills relatively quick. Very important is that be open to learning and be open to absorbing new skills, applying them on the fly. That's quite important. So this is from kind of hard skills and traits. What is the higher you get, and it's not only in information security, it's pretty much everywhere, the more people side and customer management side, internal, external customers, becomes of an importance. So emotional EQ is becoming more and more a thing. Ability to listen to your customers, understand what they need, signal that you understand what they need, adjust and pivot and deliver. That's key. So execution is probably the third one I would call out, because there are with pure salesy, be it internally, externally, you can go only thus far. At some point in time, you'll be asked to present results of your execution, and execution is key in information security, as well as in other business areas, of course.
I think is the nice kind of thing that you said there, which is, first of all, I think you need to, and then kind of that first bit of knowing a lot of things really helps with the business communication, because if you get very focused on one area, I think to be good information security professional, exactly what you said, is you need to be able to communicate, obviously deliver things, that's an absolute must. But for me, it's like, if you can't communicate upwards, you could be the best technical person in the world, but if you can't explain the problem to the business stakeholders and get buy-in and change, ultimately, you're not going to be successful.
You will not be successful as probably a CISO or...
Yeah. As long as you've got that person who can do it, right, I guess.
Well, good thing is there are different places or roles inside information security. So folks who hate communicating or speaking business, as one of my old colleagues put it, don't worry, it's all good. It's just you need to be in the right place, I guess, right? So if you are facing customers, you need to have good customer skills. You need to speak their language, right? If you are in a director, manager, CISO position, you need to understand basics of P&L. You need to understand NPV, rate of return, what have you, so that you can speak the same language with finance people and with business people, actually, who think in numbers.
So I'm going to throw you the curveball, which we throw at everyone. If you could have one security problem to fix, what would it be?
Let me kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. I spoke to a CISO of a huge company. It's a huge company. A couple of what was it, already months back, and I asked him the same question. And he said, "Well, we're here in security. We're not here to wave magic wands. We just work hard and get things done." I was like, "Okay, that's fair. That is an answer." My next tempting answer is make phishing go away. But then, as you can imagine, right? So if you cut one head of a hydra, two more heads appear. So you never know. Maybe phishing isn't that bad. If we cut off phishing, then whatever some other forms of initial access will appear that will make life. So I would actually, I would wish that everybody working in IT and in information security in particular would become a little bit more self-aware, calmer, relaxed, so that too shall pass type of attitude, but not to an extreme. I've seen when it's like, yeah, we're ransomware, that too shall pass, not to that extreme, but many of us are really pushing pushing it, and they're pushing it into unhealthy work hours, or really get burnout occurs. So a little bit more self-awareness and Zen, calm in their lives. So that would be my magic wand wish.
Fantastic. So one of the things that we always like to do is ask if other security leaders we have in this podcast, is there anyone that you'd like to recommend that we have on the podcast?
Yes. So I think who will be, I thought of two people. One of them I know, one of them I don't know personally. So the person I know is Mark Conley, who was CISO of Thomson Reuters. He was CISO of Boston Consulting Group, and he's one of the people from whom I learned a ton of things. And so he is absolutely my role model in the CISO world, if you want. A person who I don't know, but I'm absolutely, so actually a person who was a trigger for me to start moving into the information security space is Steve Gibson from Gibson Research Corporation in California. And I'm one of the pioneers of information security podcasts. Initially, it started as 15 minutes podcasts, and then evolved into longer ones. He's a fantastic person, and everybody can learn so much from him. I hope it's okay that I'm doing a little bit of advertisement.
No, go for it. It's always nice to hear people's stories and a bit more behind them. So, look, Alex, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. If our listeners want to hear a bit more from you, connect with you, where's the best place to get in touch?
LinkedIn. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Let's talk about business continuity, Zen, information security, or anything else.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for having me.